What is going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into another edition of GC Live. I'm Jack Veltri. Kendall Smith will be joining me here shortly. I think she's running a little bit late with traffic and stuff, getting set up again. She's, on the go, always busy and whatnot. So Kendall should be joining us shortly, but I told her we'll get the show started and then she'll come on in and we'll get right into everything. But hope you guys are all doing well on this Wednesday. It's a little dreary out here in Columbia. Not going to lie. The weather has not been kind. It's a real departure from what we had the other day over the weekend. And now it's gloomy out and all that. But here she is, the
Hi.
show. What's going on? How are you, Kendall?
I'm good. How are you? Sorry that I'm running late. Charlotte traffic is not ideal at all, especially when it's raining out and it's not good. So everybody drive safe out there, but made it here safe. We're all good. So it's great to be here. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing good, Kendall. Yeah, I mean, the weather's atrocious outside. It was literally a few days ago. It was as nice as can be. You can drive outside, windows down, but now it's just, people are asking how's the weather going to be with baseball this weekend now too. It's like, I don't know. It's going to be it's going to be wet outside, I think. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it changes. The forecast can always change. We don't want that for opening weekend for Gamecock baseball. We're going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit on the show, but we got a couple of things to get to here today. Of course, women's basketball, men's basketball. We'll talk some baseball as well. Jack, before we do, did we already give a shout out to Clint?
Not yet. I had started maybe like 30 seconds before you came in.
Perfect. So I wasn't too late. I was not too late.
Now, so anyway, let's talk about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. That's our main sponsor of the day. You'll see him right above us here if you're watching live on video right now. But if you're listening later on podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, Clint is your guy to call if you're in the need for help with your mortgage or you're looking to buy a home. Clint's your guy to go to. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan. He's also a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. You'll see him above us here on screen as usual for all of our GC Live programs. So if you want to give him a call, it's 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597. Or you can go to ClintHammond.com to get in touch with him.
Yeah, we appreciate Clint and all that he does for us here at Gamecock Central. He's been the presenting sponsor of GC Live for quite some time. So we are very thankful for him and all that he does. But Jack, a lot to talk about here today. And I think we should start it off with women's basketball. Obviously, an upsetting loss the other day. We won't get too much into that game specifically, but I want to look just a little bit further ahead for the team because I think that's where a lot of the questions lie at this point. Like people are starting to panic a little bit because we're not really used to this with South Carolina women's basketball. They've always been so good. They're still a very good team this year. And I think that's kind of where we need to come in right now. And we just need to say, okay, season's not over. There's still a chance for South Carolina. I think that's the question with a lot of people. Like after that loss, do you feel like the trajectory of South Carolina's season has changed?
No. I mean, anyone hitting the panic button on this season is kind of, I don't want to say overreacting, but I'm going to call it what it is, overreacting. This is a team that is number 4 in the country, 22-2 on the year. And I know people are upset that South Carolina slipped behind Texas in the AP poll, but guess what? It doesn't really matter. It's just a poll, just a ranking. These aren't the final rankings. South Carolina still has everything it wants out in front of them. Like if they dropped a few games here or something and they kind of fell out of the SEC race to get the 1 seed, then yeah, I think there would be a little bit of concern. Like I just don't think this team is showing any signs of being not even mediocre, but just good because they're a great team. And if the next step back is good, they're still a competitive team, but like you expect them to be competing for championships. And I think that's still the case. And so as South Carolina still wins out here, they can get the 1 seed in the SEC, even if Texas were to also win out because they split the season series. South Carolina won by 17 in Columbia a few weeks ago. And then the Gamecocks lost in Austin over the weekend, as we all know. But I think South Carolina's fine. Like again, they lost a game. It happens. I'm sure everyone was losing their mind when they got blown out by UCLA back early in the season, losing by 15 points out there in Southern California. But I think this team's going to be fine. Again, everything they have is still in front of them. That's the important thing. And I think under Dawn Staley, I mean, they've proven to handle adversity very well. So I think this team's going to bounce back very nicely in the coming games here.
Yeah, and one thing that we know about Dawn and the way that she runs the program is just her calmness is very much always present with the group. It appears like she's very collected. She's very calm, even in the midst of some highs and some lows for the team. And obviously a low that came this past weekend, losing to Texas. But we've had this conversation here on the show before, Jack. South Carolina lost to UCLA earlier in the season. We talked about that as like a moment for the Gamecocks that maybe was a good thing in some ways because it allowed them to kind of hit the reset button. We saw after that loss to UCLA that they really started to play some fantastic basketball in the weeks following. Do you see this loss to Texas in the same kind of way? Do you think this was something that was necessary as we inch closer to the tournament? Or is this something where you're a little bit more like, okay, this isn't something that we feel like we see in the same way that we did the UCLA game?
I don't think it's the same because, number one, I think coming into that UCLA game, while South Carolina just continued to win, I think the issue is that they weren't playing their best basketball. They were, I mean, let's be honest, some of those scores may indicate South Carolina just blew out opponents and stuff. But, like, honestly, there were moments in these games early on in the year where they're just kind of struggling to get wins. Like, I think back to the Michigan game, the NC State game, even the Clemson game for a little bit before South Carolina went on a nice run. And then that leads into the UCLA game where they lost. And that was kind of the wake-up call, I think, of, okay, they were on this really long winning streak. I think it was like 43 games. They won so many games coming off the national championship, hadn't lost in forever. And it was kind of that reset of like, okay, this team's beatable. They got some stuff to work through, and they did. And they came out responding accordingly, going out to Fort Myers and really blowing out their next few opponents. And then it's carried over into SEC play. So I don't think this game necessarily is the same situation because, number one, South Carolina has been playing much better basketball as of late. It's just, I think we all knew going into the year, Texas is a very good team. You're probably going to end up splitting the season series with them. At least it's what I thought because you play them twice this year. You were fortunate to beat them by as much as you did at home. And it was always going to be tough going on the road to Austin in that environment, a top 5 team in the country, and coming out of there with a win. And we saw what happened. So I think it showed that, like, they're still not like they can be beaten, by a very good team that matches up with them. But overall, I don't think this is the same situation where it's like, oh man, South Carolina has really been struggling at this point in the year, and they're really showing showing some signs of regression. They've won countless games going into, like, they hadn't lost since the UCLA game before Texas. So I think they're going to be fine. And again, as the SEC regular season winds down, you get into the conference tournament and stuff. I feel like this is where South Carolina really heats up again. And again, they're fortunate to have their next 3 games at home, which is a really big deal after going on a week-long road trip and whatnot. You get to play UConn on Sunday. That's obviously the marquee game, I think, left on the regular season slate. And then you get Kentucky at the end of the year. By the way, they just lost to Ole Miss recently. But I think South Carolina's got a chance to finish out the regular season strong and potentially still get the 1 seed going into the SEC tournament.
Yeah, if you take anything from this, and there's a great article about it on GamecockCentral.com as well, like, it is not over for South Carolina in terms of SEC play. That's not the case at all. So go check out that article. Everything is still, it is still good up until this point. South Carolina has the chance to rebound tomorrow playing Florida. And then, as you mentioned, the big UConn game coming up this weekend. With the Texas loss, are you a little bit more nervous for that now, Jack?
I mean, there's always some nerves, right? But then again, it's like you could say the same thing about UConn. They recently just lost to Tennessee in Knoxville. So it's like, look, teams are going to get beat in college basketball, men's, women's, whatever. Like, even South Carolina women's basketball is, prone to losing a game or two every now and then. It's just going to come down to, okay, how is this team going to respond? Luckily, it's not the next game on the schedule. You get a chance to play a Florida team that I think you should be able to beat tomorrow night at CLA. And then you got the big game on Sunday against the Huskies, and College Game Day is going to be back in town. It's a 1 o'clock tip. I mean, it's at home. I think this is where South Carolina really thrives. And I'm going to be surprised if they lose this game, But I think this is one they should definitely be able to win. I would imagine.
Well, we will have to see. Everyone is always super pumped up for the South Carolina UConn matchups. We've seen that in the past. So this one should be a good one here this weekend. But again, South Carolina's take on Florida tomorrow before they get to that UConn game. It's a one game at a time mentality for the group. And, I think both of us can sit here and say we still feel good about the team. We still feel good about their chances when it comes to winning the conference, when it comes to performing well in the tournament. I think South Carolina has the ability to do that. A couple of tough losses, obviously, here this year. And as you talked about just a couple of minutes ago, losses that came at different times and will serve different purposes, I think, for this group. That first loss kind of gave South Carolina the chance to reset. And again, we talked about the dominant basketball that they played after that loss. So I'm curious to see how this loss to Texas will affect the team, how they'll respond, what they'll do, the kind of basketball that we'll see them play after the loss. So we'll get some of those answers obviously tomorrow, and then heading into the weekend against UConn as well, which is sure to be a really great matchup. And just the excitement that surrounds it is a lot too. So it'll be interesting to see the way the team not only responds to the loss to Texas here this weekend when they play UConn, but also how they respond to the environment that will be created this weekend, because it's definitely going to be one that is big, and it's good that it's at home. I'm excited for South Carolina in that regard. But yeah, when you've got College game day coming in, it's a different kind of vibe. So we'll see how that goes. The women's team, though, they're still in the hunt, everybody. They still have a chance. They're all good. No worries. So we wanted to come on here and certainly say that at the top of the show. Make sure everybody knows. And again, head to GamecockCentral.com. We got some great articles about the women's team over there. But Jack, let's pivot. Let's talk about men's basketball. It's been hard. It has. And everybody watching the show knows it. You obviously know it because you've been covering the team. South Carolina has just flat out struggled this season. And it's been a combination of a lot of things with this team. So, Jack, I'm just curious from your perspective, heading into tonight's game, how are you feeling about it? Do you think there's a chance?
I mean, there's always a chance. There's always a chance, right? Some people probably feel more confident than I do. I think there's a chance, but again, a lot of things have to probably go right for this team in order to win. Number one, you're playing a very good Ole Miss team that does not turn the ball over a lot, and they happen to force a lot of turnovers on defense. So that doesn't really play well for South Carolina as a team that, granted, only turned the ball over 9 times against Kentucky, but they are very prone to throwing the ball away, making careless mistakes, and that leads to a recipe for disaster in most cases. So you hope tonight you can kind of be that team that, look, no one's really been able to do it against the Rebels this year. You hope you can maybe win the turnover battle and force Ole Miss into some missed shots, some mistakes. You get this game at home, which is definitely beneficial for South Carolina. They've played really good basketball when they've been on their home floor this year. It's just they haven't been able to win. And the thing is, there's no real middle ground here. It's either they've been blown out, they've lost by double-digit points in 5 different SEC games this year, with 4 of those coming by 20 points apiece. And then the other 5 games, they've lost by a combined 16 points, with all those losses coming by 5 or less points. So something's got to give, I think, at some point. I think my confidence is slowly wavering, I think. I just think this is a lost season at the end of the day, and it's a little too late to start really turning it around. I think at this point you're just trying to find a way to get a win, and it's going to be tough in a conference that is definitely the tops in college basketball this season, maybe the best of all time. We'll see how the season ends up shaking out. But this is one of those games that you have like a chance to win. I mean, ESPN's giving you about a 34% chance to win. KenPom's giving you a 31% chance to win. That may not seem high at all, but given the circumstances of where you're at 0-10 in league play, you got a chance. So we'll see what happens. You're at home. Maybe the crowd will be good. We'll see how many people are still into this men's team. But I'm looking forward to being there tonight. It's been a little bit since I've been at CLA for a men's game with baseball going on and stuff. So it'll be nice.
You talk about it being a lost season, in your opinion, for the group. So, that's obviously disappointing to hear. But when you look at what's ahead for South Carolina as they just try to finish the season on a positive note, what is the motivation, do you think, for this group to do that? Like at this point, if you look at it from the perspective of this is a lost season and it's over and there's really no point, what do you think is the motivation to, I don't want to say keep trying, but just try to make something of it?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And again, the one thing with this team is while they haven't been playing good enough basketball to win games, again, they've come close a few times. I think they have been competitive in some of these games. Like they're trying to get the win. It's not like they're giving up and mentally checked out and stuff. Like they show up every night for these games and stuff and still play to try to win. So I think it's just that. I think you're just trying to take it one game at a time. And obviously, the as the season goes on and as the losses, if they keep stacking up, the cloud of potentially going 0-18 in league play is going to hover over this team. And it probably starts creeping into your mind a little bit with 8 games left to go in the regular season. But I think at this point, you're just trying to take it one game at a time, get a win, and see what happens. Because, again, it looks a lot – it's not, like, better, but it looks a lot different if you go 1-17 compared to 0-18. Like, everyone's going to remember the fact that you went winless in SEC play in the best year in conference history. Comparatively, you go 1-17, it's like, all right, you just had a really bad year. Like, there's a big difference between 1 win and 0 wins, in my opinion.
I'm hoping for 2. Like, I think 1 still doesn't – it sounds better than 0. You're totally right. But, we talk about all the time just recruiting-wise, not only for the football team, which we primarily talk about recruiting for, but basketball as well. Like a season like this could be detrimental when you think about recruiting in the future of the program, but you also think about what South Carolina was able to do last year and the way that they were able to play. So if you're a recruit, Jack, and you're looking at this South Carolina program, how are you looking at it right now?
Yeah, I think you still have confidence in Lamont Paris. I think I definitely can see this going a different direction next year. I think you could actually probably turn it around next year because I don't know. I just think you missed out on getting the right guys, I think, in the portal. Like you got guys that to fit your needs. It's just, it hasn't worked out. Sometimes teams just don't come together the same way everything came together for South Carolina last year. Like it was just a perfect storm of so many things going right that you were able to win 26 games after winning 11 in year 1. I think it's just been the opposite this year. Your portal guys haven't provided the same production. You're not winning games. You're losing a lot of the games that you should have been winning last year and stuff. I mean, it's just a lot of things are going wrong for this team. And if you're a recruit, I mean, I don't think I think it more so leads you to be like motivated to come in and try to turn this thing around, if anything. But I know in today's age of sports and stuff and NIL and whatnot, guys, are in it for the money in some cases, and they want to, go play for a winner. And so, I think the class coming in next season, I'm very interested to see how their roles are for this team. But as for the future, I'm not sure. I could see it affecting things if this is a multi-year thing where South Carolina just isn't competitive at all. But I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and think this is just a one-year thing and that they can get back to being competitive next year for sure.
What is your concern level from a transfer portal standpoint with this team? Like, how worried are you about a lot of guys leaving?
Well, I mean, they're going to have a lot of guys leaving. Like Colin Murray Boyles is going to probably be gone if I'm if I'm wrong on that, whatever. But like, I got the vibe. I just get the vibe that I think everyone knew this is probably the last year of him. If he's playing well enough, he's going to go to the draft. He's probably going to be a first-round pick. No reason for him not to leave. You're also going to be losing a lot of guys that are probably going to be out of eligibility. I mean, obviously, Jacoby Wright. We'll see what happens with Nick Pringle. You're losing guys like that. And I think it's probably good for the team to lose some of the pieces that maybe just aren't producing this year. And I think, Mike, it's not concern, but it's more so like you have to be able to get the right guys to come in next year because otherwise you strike out on your portal guys again for next season. I think you see a similar result to this year because guess what? The SEC, they're very good this year, and this conference is not going to be, going back down to being mediocre anytime soon. So you really do have to get this right in the offseason. It's critical because you're entering year 4 of Lamont Paris at South Carolina next year. If you have another bad year, I mean, people are already calling for his job, I've seen and stuff, but like, you have another bad year, I think that really heats up a little bit. So you definitely got to be able to turn this thing around. But again, it all starts by finishing this season out strong and then going into the portal, into recruiting, getting the right guys to come in and try to turn this thing back around.
Well, Jeff 2001 is calling that the men's team is going to win here tonight. So
Yeah,
there we have
we'll
it.
see.
Up there. I like the positivity. We'll
Me
keep
too.
it going. I mean, as long as they're still playing, like you said, Jack, there is still a chance. And we've seen the fight from the team throughout the season. So, there have been games that have obviously been blowouts, but there have been games that have been close that South Carolina could have won. So when you look at it from that standpoint, that, there's a chance South Carolina could keep this game close. And there's a chance that South Carolina could win this game. We'll just have to see how things shake out. But I appreciate the positivity, Jeff. We're trying to keep those positive vibes going as much as we can, specifically Jack, because he is covering the team on a day in, day out basis. So shout out Jack for that. But yeah, we'll just have to see kind of how this season shakes out. Didn't go the way that anybody expected it to go, I would imagine. But at the end of the day, this is the situation that you're in. So you try to make the most of it. And we will try to turn the page here because I think we've had enough of the men's basketball talk, and we're going to talk about something that people are excited about. You're in the middle of men's basketball season. They're not doing too well. Everyone's upset and in a frenzy about it. But you have the hope and the promise of a baseball season that is on deck. No pun intended. Before we get into that, though, let's shout out our next sponsor here on the show.
Yep, let's talk about Prize Picks. So they are the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. The easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports is just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and then, of course, watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. The Super Bowl obviously just passed, as we all know, with the Eagles winning. So football is, for the time being, no longer on the table until next season to play on Prize Picks. But you've got Major League Baseball coming up. You've got basketball, pro, and college going on, and a handful of other sports. So if you're interested, just go to prizepicks.com or download the Prize Picks app and use the code GC that on screen that stands for Gamecock Central to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups.
All right, Jack, time to talk about South Carolina baseball. We're all excited. It feels like, I don't know, like I would kind of say like a Christmas Eve type of vibe. Obviously today is not Christmas Eve. Tomorrow will be like Christmas Eve because you're getting ready for opening day. But like that anticipation, I think, is really starting to build up. We've talked about this now for a couple of weeks. And now that you're at the moment where it's about to be here and we've talked about the team for so long, talking season, it's over. It's coming to a close. And we are going to see how the Pulmonary era starts for South Carolina, which is just so exciting. So for you, I just want to catch your vibe from the standpoint of someone who is covering the team about your level of excitement and anticipation heading into opening day.
Yeah, I mean, and this comment right here from Garnet Yardbird's totally right, that I do light up when the topic does turn to baseball, because again, it's favorite sport, and also it's a new era, right? It's refreshing. Like, it feels different this year. So yes, I am excited about this baseball season from a reporting standpoint and just getting to get back to the ballpark and watch college baseball again. It is the best time of the year besides college football, without question. And I think this team, look, I saw them play for a few scrimmages last week in the build-up to opening day here. I think they look ready to go. I was very impressed with what I saw, to be honest. Like, some of my concerns I've had, I think they've been answered. Like, and it's one thing to see it in the preseason, but if it can translate over to the regular season, like I think it can, I think this team could be a lot better than people expect. Like, I think you have your pitching rotation is in very good shape right now. Dylan Eskew, Matthew Becker, Jake McCoy, who's now the Sunday starter, they all pitched very well last week. I think the lineup was doing its thing. Your bullpen, you have some pieces that can work. And then I think from a defensive standpoint, you were a lot better in the field. I think you're going to be a much better defensive team this season compared to last year, which I know was an issue. And so I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about this team, but it's got to translate over to the real deal. You can do it in the preseason, sure. If you can do it in the regular season and you can carry it into SEC play in about a month, I think you're feeling real good about this team's chances.
Yeah, and with South Carolina, obviously they will build up to SEC play. So the opponents that they're playing at the top of the season are obviously going to be a lot different than the opponents that they're playing in SEC play. But what can the team do this weekend, Jack, to kind of solidify your thoughts from the standpoint of, you said you're feeling a lot better about things and you've had some of those questions answered, but what can they do this weekend when you see them play live game action against another team that's even further going to affirm those thoughts that you have about the team having the chance to be pretty good?
Well, number one, I think you got to sweep this weekend. You should be able to sweep these opponents you're playing early in weekend series. Clemson's the exception to that because they're a very good team, and we'll see how that series goes. But you're playing Sacred Heart this weekend. You're playing Milwaukee in a few weeks, and then Morehead State right before SEC play. You should sweep these series. Now, in reference to this weekend specifically, more so besides sweeping, how do you get there? You need good pitching, I think, number one. You need to see that Eskew, Becker, they were very solid in the preseason. Very solid. Again, the perspective on the last outings of Becker, Eskew, and McCoy, they didn't allow a single run in their last outings combined. So that's very good to see. Can they give you 5 good innings this weekend, about 75 pitches probably, and let the bullpen take care of the rest? I think that's number one. And then what is your offense going to look like besides Ethan Petrie, Kennedy Jones, the names we know? How are your newcomers going to produce in their first games with a real crowd out there at Founders Park, and then the defense? I mean, it's got to be better this year. As I mentioned before, I think it's going to be better this year, but we'll see. Again, it's one thing to do in the preseason, got to do in the regular season, and also this going along with the defense. How's the catching position going to shake out? How is Talmadge LeCroy going to do? Probably catching 2 games behind the plate this weekend, and then we'll see who's the backup behind LeCroy. It'll either be Max Coffer or Ryan Bakes. But one thing I am a little concerned about, I posted a story today on GC about my reasons for concern and optimism and all that. One of my concerns that I'll share is how are the catchers going to do with live base runners? Because there were some stolen bases given up during the preseason and the fall. And I know it's one thing when guys probably have the green light and stuff to run, but I mean, it is a little bit of a concern that guys were stealing bases so often, it seemed like, and the throws weren't always the best going down to second base and third base and all that. So I think there's a lot of things you can look at here. I know I kind of rambled on, but I do think that this team is in good position to go ahead and at least win this series, but you definitely want to sweep these early series.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just rack up the wins where you can get them and obviously start off the season on a high note. That's important for the team. And again, we've seen some of these questions that we had kind of be answered. And I use the word kind of because, again, you haven't seen this group, and I haven't, and nobody has, in live game action as a team, against an opponent that is not an inner squad opponent. So we'll see that here this weekend with South Carolina at Founders Park, one of, if not the best venues to watch college baseball in the entire country, which we are super excited about. Obviously, Jack and I love baseball. But Jack, we talk about some of these guys that are coming back. We talk about the newcomers, and I'm only going to let you pick one. Okay. I'm not going to.
Good. Let me pick one.
Jack already knows where I'm going with this.
Just set a limit in there. I will.
Who are you most looking forward to seeing out there this weekend?
Oh gosh. All right. Let me look through the list here of guys. I'm going to go with the tone setter for this weekend. I'm very excited to see what Dylan Eskew does, and he's pitching on Friday, getting his first opening day start for South Carolina. That's the guy that if he pitches 5 good innings, just like he did, if he pitches the way he did in his last scrimmage outing, again, he had 7 strikeouts, no walks, really looked about as good as I've ever seen Dylan Eskew pitch. If he does that again against Sacred Heart, set the tone for the weekend, and it gets you feeling good about what your pitching staff can do, because Eskew is one of those guys that was a little up and down last year. He had some good outings like Kentucky and James Madison in the NCAA tournament, but there were also some struggles mixed in there in between. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Dylan does this year with adding the cutter and some other new pitches to his pitch repertoire. And again, the starter on Friday always sets the tone for the weekend. So if Dylan has a good outing, I feel pretty good about where things can go the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, certainly a high honor to be that Friday starter for the group. And when you think about it from an opening night perspective as well, obviously that is extremely important for the team. You know, we want to see improvements with South Carolina's baseball team this year. Obviously, that's why a coaching change was made. And you know, I think the fan base as a whole is just looking for something to be a little bit more excited about with them. And we've talked about this on the show plenty of times. We think that there is reason to believe this year that South Carolina will be a much better baseball team than they were last year. And there is reason to believe that South Carolina can take it pretty far this year. We're not saying the College World Series, okay? So before anyone like clips this and then says that we said that at the beginning of the season, we're not saying that. We're not saying it's not possible, but we're not necessarily predicting that at this point. But we talked about it last week, Jack, just where South Carolina is predicted to finish in the preseason poll for the SEC is maybe a little bit low for them.
Yeah, I think it's a bit low. I mean, the way I look at it is, and by the way, South Carolina was picked 14th in the SEC preseason poll. I just attribute it to the fact that the SEC is really, really good this year, as usual. There are a lot of teams that we know that are going to be good, and teams that had great seasons last year. I mean, again, South Carolina was not very good last year. They made it to the tournament, but it was kind of a struggle to get there, honestly. It took a nice little run out in Hoover in the SEC tournament to solidify your spot in making the postseason. But I think that's probably why, and also the fact that the people that are voting on this stuff, I mean, the rankings, all that, the baseball writers that don't cover this team, the coaches that don't get to see this team in action and only have last year and what they hear around the block to kind of base their opinions off of, it makes sense why they would pick South Carolina where they are. From my perspective, and I think other people that have watched this team day in and day out in the preseason, I think they could be better than that. They definitely can be. And you look at what they have. If their pitching staff performs to their potential, things are really good. If you get offense, if you're a good contact-oriented team outside of the power bats in the lineup like Petrie and Kennedy Jones that are going to hit homers this year, and you get on base and you drive and runs, it's a recipe for success. And you play good defense, you're going to be fine. So I think South Carolina does have the potential to, I'm not saying they'll be top seed in the conference by end of the year, winning the SEC tournament, but I think they could be middle of the pack, and that's more than good enough to potentially host a regional or do a little bit better than that.
Yeah, and obviously so much of that depends on the team staying healthy, and you hope for that across the board, not just with South Carolina, but with every team across college baseball and all of baseball in general. Pitchers and catchers, a lot of them reported today or yesterday. If you're the Chicago Cubs, you reported over the weekend. So we're really starting to get into the thick of baseball season with college baseball starting, and at the professional level, spring training starting as well. So just so much of it, and this is for every team across every sport, is staying healthy. And that's what you want if you're South Carolina baseball, so you can continue with that consistency. And obviously Paul Mainieri can stay with his winning ways because he is a winner. There's a great article out about that on Gamecock Central right now, so check it out. But he's had such a career, and for him to come back to South Carolina, like, he could have easily just been like, I'm done. Like, I've done, like, he's done everything. Like, he has done it. He's had his success. He's proven himself. But he came to South Carolina for a reason. There's a why, and he obviously sees the potential of this program, the way that this program has been in the past, what this program can be. So being able to watch him coach South Carolina this season as we start to see the team get into live game action, how excited are you to finally see Paul Mainieri at the helm for the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I mean, he's talked about before that opening day is the most, I think I'm using the right word here, stressful day where the nerves are at an all-time high, bigger than playing in game 3 of a College World Series or something like that, a chance to win a national championship, just because there's so many unknowns of how guys are going to perform, how things are going to look in the first game of the year, and if they're going to run smoothly or not. And so I think there's going to be a lot of buzz in the building on Friday. I'm not sure what the crowd will look like. The weather is supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be sunny on Friday, but it's going to be a little bit chilly. But I still expect a relatively good crowd for opening day, maybe a sellout. And I think people are going to be excited about this team and what Mainieri is able to do. They've heard so much about him from, the stuff we write on Gamecock Central, other sites, and just hearing him talk in press conferences. I think this is going to be a very exciting first year for Mainieri. And me personally, I'm very excited too to see what he can do as this season gets underway.
Yes, I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. Everybody across Gamecock Nation is looking forward to it. We're just excited, I think, as a whole to see what the group can do, obviously to turn the page from last year and for South Carolina to get back to its winning ways. We talk about the winning ways of Paul Mainieri, but that's ultimately the goal of this program, to get to the College World Series, to win the College World Series. South Carolina is a very capable program of doing that. So, Jack, I know we're going to talk a ton more about South Carolina baseball, about basketball. We got it all. But I think for today, that's actually going to wrap us up. You've got a basketball game to get to.
I do.
I have some other stuff to do. So we appreciate all of you tuning in to watch us and join us here on the show. We're very much looking forward to opening day coming up on Friday for South Carolina baseball, hoping for a men's basketball win tonight. And the women's team will get back to its winning ways, I'm sure of it, tomorrow against Florida, and then a big game against UConn this upcoming weekend. We hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us. Head over to GamecockCentral.com for more. Follow us on social media at Gamecock Central. Jack, enjoy your night at the basketball game. Enjoy your weekend at the baseball field. I know you are so excited to be back at it, and I'm excited too. I'll be at Founders Park sooner rather than later.
Let's go. But good to hear it.
Keep up all the great work, Jack. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. For Jack Veltri, I'm Kendall Smith. This has been GC Live here on Gamecock Central. We'll see you soon.